Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Meta Report. I'm your host Deathy, and today we're going to talk about the biggest changes in the meta, as well as the heroes that are the most prevalent and the builds that you can use to dominate in your games. Of course, at the end of the video, there's going to be a bit of an updated tier list as of most episodes, in which I'll go into some of the detail. The tier list will not be extremely detailed, but it'll give you an idea of where I think heroes rank currently in the meta. Without further ado, let's get into it. As always, we're going to start with the overall meta changes. First of all, soul sharing is slightly worse, so they nerfed it a little bit again, and now we're basically almost back to where we were before they reintroduced like a buffed version of soul sharing. So if you have two people in a lane, they each get 60% past 8 minutes, meaning they get a total of 120% of the available soul from a specific trooper. So having two people in a lane is still totally fine, but if you group up too much, you will be penalized much more than you were in the previous patch. The game is much slower. There's a lot of reasons for that. Buildings are stronger. They gave walkers more damage. Soul sharing is slightly worse. They made it so that you always get a second fight in your base, because when the patron goes down, everyone's respawn timer is reduced by 20 seconds, making it so you almost always get a second chance to fight when your patron goes down. On top of that, the middle walkers are much stronger than the side walkers. The middle walkers have a lot more health, which makes them a lot harder to take, and very often it is a bait trying to take them on early, because it's very, very easy for the defending team to defend them, especially since they give bullet and spirit resistance to the people around them. And we got 3 new items, so we'll look a little bit today at these items and see who they're good on. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Now let's get into the meta heroes. Starting first with Lady Geist. Now, Lady Geist had kind of, been gone in the meta a little bit with the faster paced game. She didn't feel like she had enough impact in the 20 to 25 minute games in order to be picked a lot, at least at a high level. But with the games being longer, Lady Geist has a lot more time to hit her timings. And once she hit her timings, she's very, very strong. So the build that I'd recommend, it was actually kind of hard because there's a decent amount of Lady Geist builds, but I have a decent amount of problems with most of them, or I feel like most of them are not the most optimal. So Salty has been working on a build. Salty's my teammate, so full disclaimer, obviously I'm a little bit biased. If you don't go for the Salty build, I think the second best build or very similar build would be the Snow Geist, so you can check that out in game. But regardless, I would recommend that you follow the Salty build. I think it's pretty streamlined, I think it's very good, and I think it works at pretty much all ranks, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced. I think that this build can 100% work for you. And basically the idea with Geist and the reason why she's so strong is she can farm insanely fast, and on top of that, once she gets farmed, she just has higher value than some other characters. For example, what are you more scared of, a Geist with 30,000 souls or a 7 with 30,000 souls? I think almost always you're going to be more scared of the Geist, even though the 7 can maybe reach that point a little bit quicker. So I'd recommend you guys try this. Just make sure that if you play Geist that you farm a decent amount, and once again, if you're struggling with Geist, buy anti-heal and buy silences. The new item, Silencer, well, it's actually not a new item, but the new version of Silencer is very, very good against Geist. It gives you spirit resist, debuff resist, and it reduces Geist damage significantly. As always with this build, make sure that you imbue your Malice with Mystic Reverb and not your Bomb. Next up on the list is Haze. Now, one thing I'd like to say is that there are a ton of heroes that are really good. I'm not going to touch on all of them. I'm just going to touch on the ones that have kind of resurfaced, right? There's a bunch of heroes that were good last patch that are still good. For example, Viscous, Paradox, etc. You guys will see that in the tier list at the end, so make sure to keep watching. But for Haze, Haze used to be considered not very good. Some people in Europe in tournaments did pick her, but overall, she was considered to be one of the worst heroes in the game, and she received a significant amount of buffs. Namely, she got spirit damage on her ultimate, which is actually really big. And on top of that, she got the 6 meters per second sprint speed at level 1, which makes her much more of an assassin than she was previously. So the build that I'd recommend, there's a few good builds, namely there's Chrome's build, there's Play With Me's build, but I think Zerggy's build is probably the easiest to follow. Now, it doesn't have a lot of annotations, but I think it's the most streamlined, that just has the items you need and really nothing else. You don't need to think too much about it. So if you just buy the items that are here roughly in the order, you buy Quicksilver Reload after Combat Barrier and Swift Striker, you'll probably do just fine. Just make sure you don't play Haze as a super farm heavy character, but that you play Haze as a very active carry. She can get active super early. I mean, the moment she has Combat Barrier, she already does a tremendous amount of damage with solo kills early, and you really want to make sure that you go for those solo kills, because with Spleep Dagger and ult, the moment you have 1 point in ult, people die pretty much instantly. So she's very strong. She might be a little bit bit too strong. We'll see. I think I don't know if she's in broken category, but she's extremely strong, and I recommend that you guys pick her up if you like playing her. She's in the best state she's been in a long time. Now, despite not being heavily prioritized in tournament play, I think Mo and Krill seems very strong this patch, particularly if you're playing at slightly lower MMR. I think the higher up in MMR he goes, he kind of becomes a little bit worse, but I think he's still very strong across the board. His win rate has gone up significantly. Now, just so you guys know, I don't use solely win rate to do these meta reports. I do a lot based on my own games and what I see in tournaments, etc. So take this with a grain of salt. But basically, with Mo and Krill, the only thing that's significantly changed is the fact that he now gets 70 health per kill rather than, I believe it was 30 previously. So he gets a lot more tanky a lot quicker, especially if you snowball and you keep getting combo kills, and this makes him like very, very tanky very early. And he was already like a pretty good character. Like, he had a good laning stage, he's very tanky, all of his kit has good utility, he's got the disarm and everything, so not a lot has changed. And I would recommend that if you're a Mo and Krill player, this is a great time to play him. As far as the build that I'd recommend you follow, I think Mobalytics Mo and Krill by Hydration is a classic that's pretty much always going to serve you well. Of course, some of these items are a little bit more situational and you have to do some decision making. Getting Phantom Strike early is a huge power spike, so if you have some money, I would recommend you go for that early. But generally, this build is pretty straightforward and is going to get you what you need in order to get those pickoffs and be decently tanky on this hero. So there's going to be a little bit of decision making. As you can see, there's too many green items, so you're going to need to sell some items or you know, not buy all of them. But overall, I think it's a pretty good build. I'm sure that there are plenty of other good builds that I could have put here, but this is the one that I think is kind of the most streamlined and high level build. Oh, Shiv, I don't know if anyone missed you, but you're back. Well, it turns out that Shiv really didn't need a lot to be back, and Shiv was not bad. I've been saying so on stream, but he got pretty much buffs across the table, and now he's very good again. And I think that the pace of the game also helps him, because Shiv, in my opinion, is not a character that comes online super quickly. Of course, he can still be useful early game, but he really gets online around those 15-20k souls mark, which was a little bit too slow in the previous patch, but now he's perfectly fine. He's actually very good now, I think. As far as builds on Shiv, there's a couple Shiv builds going around. Melee Shiv is back, mostly thanks to the new item Spirit Snatch. So this is a good opportunity to talk about this item, but this item is good on pretty much anybody that likes to go in and melee. So any melee build just became better because we got another tool to make use of, and it steals Spirit Resistance, which is insanely powerful because for Shiv, first of all, it gives basically minus Spirit Resist to the enemy, but on top of that, it makes you tankier, which is very important on melee builds. So overall, Melee Shiv is back. If you would like other builds, there are other good ones. For example, Hard Decky Shiv Bleed is one that you could try. That's pretty interesting if you're trying to go for a little bit more of a Bleed Shiv playstyle. However, I will say that this one is much harder to pilot. There's little lifesteal, although in mine there's not a ton of lifesteal either. So these builds are not necessarily the most beginner friendly builds, but I would recommend that you give them a try. And there are a few edits of my build as well. So if you like to check out the edits, you know, as you can see, there's like 2 or 3 edits of my build in the popular or trending tab. So check them out. Tons of way to play Shiv. You can play gun, you can play spirit, you can play melee. So just try what you like, but I really think that melee Shiv right now is most likely the best version of Shiv at the moment. But I would say that the other versions are very strong as well. Now, finally, I want to talk a little bit about Pocket, because I haven't talked about Pocket in a very long time, and Pocket's largely been considered an extremely strong hero for a long time, and he kept getting nerf after nerf after nerf, and a lot of Pocket players, or I've seen a lot of people say, is Pocket dead, is Pocket weak, etc. And I just want to clear the air and say that Pocket is a high skill hero. And he is not even close to dead. He's still extremely strong in the current meta, especially with the way that games go. And so if you want to play Pocket, it's a great time to do so. He's very strong. You can play Eidorian Spirit Pockets build. So I'll put of course, all the builds in the description as always. But just know that this build is extremely strong. And you know, some of these items are optional. For example, you usually get either Slowing Hex or Cold Front. Usually don't get both. It's a little bit situational, but based on your liking, you can pick what you like. But going the Veil Walker, you don't go the Majestic Leap anymore, so the build is a little bit harder to pilot. You need to know where the veils are. You need to use your movement a little bit better with wall jumps and things like that. But overall, Pocket's still insanely strong, and if you get to endgame with this build, you'll feel very strong. So let's talk about items. There's a few items that I'd like to talk about today, and we've got the 3 new items that I want to talk about, and then lastly, there's one item that suffered a significant change that I also want to talk about. Of course, there's plenty of other items that are good and worth mentioning, etc., but I try to keep these videos concise, so we're just going to get into the important stuff. We're going to get into the item that was most heavily modified in my opinion, which is Silencer. So Silencer used to be, you press a key, it used to be much more expensive, you press a key and then all the bullets you shoot silence people for a certain amount of time. I think it was a 2-second silence duration, but it refreshed every time you shot them for like 6 seconds or something. Now it becomes a passive, so it works kind of like toxic bullets, right? So let's say I'm playing Pocket, I buy a Silencer here, I shoot a couple shots, and after that the person has the Silencer debuff on them, and then they're silenced for 2 seconds. Now the debuff makes it so that they deal 40% less spirit damage, and on top of that, one sec, yeah, they're immune to the buildup for 12 seconds. So you can't reapply it for 12 seconds, so you can't just like perma-silence people. But yeah, on top of that, you get the stats 20% debuff resist and 15% spirit resist. So if you buy this item and you get debuff reducer, then all of a sudden you have a combined 48% debuff resist. As you can see, it stacks additively, not multiplicatively. Sorry, I can't speak, but regardless. I don't know if this is intended and if this will change in the future, because most stats in this game in terms of resistances stack multiplicatively, not additively. But this one just stacks straight on top. So if you go even further and you buy debuff remover, for example, then you'll have a total of 60% debuff resist, as you can see here, which is just insane. It makes Mo and Krill grab go from like 4 seconds to basically, you know, 1.8 second or 1.7 seconds. And so you can ignore most CC in the game without having unstoppable. Of course, the combo is very expensive, but it also gives you pretty good stats and other utility. And you don't need to go debuff remover. You can just go debuff reducer and already have more debuff resistance than if you just bought debuff remover. So pretty interesting. I think this item is very, very good against spirit heavy composition. So if you need spirit resistance and some other utility and you have a high fire rate weapon, then I would highly recommend. I think that any hero that likes to go ricochet will also like this item. So for example, we're talking about Infernus, we're talking about Mirage, any hero that just likes to apply a ton of debuffs. And of course, it's very good on Haze as well. I've been loving it. Haze struggles with large amounts of spirit damage, and so this item is just kind of perfect for her. And she also wants to solo kill people, with the 2-second silence duration is perfect for. Let's talk about the new items. First up, Spellslinger Headshot. I think this item is really bad. I think everyone I've talked to pretty much agrees. This item becomes good at a certain point in the game. So if you get late game enough, it's actually good. But until that point, it's bad. And the reason for that is that it's percent spirit power that it gives you. So you can have 12 stacks, which is 36% spirit power. But 36% spirit power, if you have 100 spirit, is only 36 spirit. And you have to land 12 headshots in order to get that. So you need to land 12 headshots to effectively get less spirit than what a Surge of Power would give you, or than improved spirit would give you. And so it just doesn't really feel worth it. It kind of feels like if you're out of slots and you don't know what to buy and you want to upgrade your Soul Shredder, then it's a good item. But other than that, I think it's pretty bad compared to the other options. We've got 2 new spitter items. Arcane Surge, which is a kinetic dash upgrade that is a purple item, which makes your next ability after a dash jump have extra range, extra duration, and extra spirit power. So I thought that this item was going to be really broken, but I think it's only very good on specific heroes that benefit from all of these stats. For example, Pocket can definitely be one of them, as he benefits from the duration and the range, although I don't love it on Pocket. Dynamo is probably the biggest, person that buys this item, because the black hole becomes insanely big with the Arcane Surge, and it's very, very strong on Dynamo and on some other heroes. But I think overall this item is mostly a situational buy if you want to upgrade your K-Dash and you benefit from these stats on certain abilities. Of course, Viscous is another person that buys it. Basically anyone that benefits from a ton of range and duration is going to enjoy this, but for most of the cast of heroes, this item is not that good. Spirit Snatch is, in my opinion, probably the best item of all the items that was added. You steal 26 spirit, you steal 12 spirit resist, and on top of that, it gives you spirit resist itself, 125 bonus health, 1 meters per second sprint speed, and 15% melee damage. So overall, it's just a very feel-good item. It is a little bit expensive, but you can steal with simply a light melee, so you don't need a heavy melee, which makes it fairly easy to proc on multiple heroes. It does have a 6-second cooldown, but remember that cooldowns are always affected by cooldown items. So if you get improved cooldown, all of a second that cooldown is 5 seconds, and if you have any other cooldown reduction, you might be able to get it down to like a 4-second cooldown and it's going to be a lot more useful. I'd say you can buy this item on any hero that likes to get in close and personal and melee people. So obviously the Abrams, the Shivs, the Yamatos, any other hero like that, this item is definitely worth considering. There are tons of other good items, but that's all I'm going to cover for today as far as items. So let's get into the tier list. Okay, so as far as the tier list, I'm going to do a slightly different approach this time. A lot of people in the past have asked me to do a little bit more explanations for the tier list. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the heroes live on the video. And I'm going to explain very briefly where they go. And I'm just going to place them one by one. I'm not going to make like a 50-minute video out of this. I'm going to make it very quick, but just so you guys have an idea of why I'm placing the heroes where they are. So starting off with Vindicta, I think Vindicta's strong. Her ultimate does an insane amount of damage early. She has a lot of tempo. She does fall off in the mid game, in the late game, sorry, but her bird is always value, especially with the recent bird resist changes. And so I think she's still very strong hero. Yamato fell off pretty hard, but I think she's still good. It's just her ultimate is no longer a get out of jail free card. It doesn't heal you anymore, which means you need to use it preemptively, and you probably need like an item like Diviner's Kevlar, for example, which helps you sustain when you use your ultimate and gives you a chance to get that kill and get that heal. I'm going to put 7 in the okay category because I don't really think 7 is that great, which is kind of weird because 7 should be good in this patch. It's a little bit slower, it gives them time to farm, etc., but I haven't felt 7s have large impact in most of the games that I've played. It kind of feels like they get really farmed, they have a lot of souls, but I would just rather have another character have that amount of farm. Of course, some of you guys may disagree and maybe 7 is a problem at your MMR. I'm just giving you my perspective. I think Bebop is okay. If you're a really, really good Bebop player, I think he can be great, but once again, very, very reliant on hitting a lot of hooks. If you're not hitting hooks, your character doesn't get value. So I think it's going to be hard for Bebop to be better than okay, because if he's better than okay, it means he's probably too strong in the hands of a good Bebop player. Of course, we'll see what happens in the future, but that's kind of how I feel about him. He's similar to Pudge in Dota, in which if Pudge is really strong and really meta, the game is probably not in a healthy state. And so I think Bebop is fine being where he is right now, but if you disagree, share your thoughts in the comments. I think Lash, I'm gonna go and put Lash in good. I think he's still very good. He does fall off late game, and so he's a little bit worse this patch. I don't think he's like super strong, but I think he's definitely good enough to pick. And if you're a Lash main, it's not like a bad patch for us or anything. It's just not the greatest. I'm going to put Great Talent at the top of okay. Given the right game and the right start, he can absolutely snowball and just dominate the game. But in most situations, he's pretty counterable and doesn't feel like he does enough damage for it to matter. So I'm going to leave him in okay. Similarly with Infernus, I'm also going to put him in okay. His win rate has been pretty much in the dumpsters, and he hasn't seen much picking in the tournament scene. I don't think he's great, but I don't think he's bad either. He's just a lot harder than he was previously. And of course, the fact that the games are longer does make him better than last patch, I think. And he got some slight adjustments. So overall, I think Infernus is probably still, pretty decent. He's just not like incredible. I'm putting Paradox in extremely strong. The hero's been extremely strong ever since the heroes existed. It's probably going to keep going unless the kit fundamentally changes. The wall's insane, the swap's insane, the carbine does a lot of damage, the nade is good. Like, all of her abilities are very strong, and she's just provides a lot of utility to the team as well as damage. I'm putting Viscus in extremely strong. His ult build is very annoying, and it's not the only build you can go on him. He still has insane support ability. His cube's insane. His ultimate's insane. Now you can parry Puddle Punch, so that it's definitely a little bit worse, but you don't really need to rely on Puddle Punch too much. But it'll be interesting to see once more people learn to parry Puddle Punch how it kind of develops. I'm putting Mirage in strong. I think in organized play, Mirage is very strong or extremely strong, but I think in pubs, he's just kind of strong or even maybe good. I kind of have a tendency to say that if you're just playing unranked or like if you're not playing in a party, I think Mirage is just kind of good. His global presence is nice, but it's hard to take advantage of it when your team is not organized or when your team's not playing the macro very well. And so I think that if you're solo queuing, Mirage is good. If you're playing an organized, the more organized you are, the better Mirage is. I would say in tournament play, he's extremely strong. I'm putting Abrams as strong. The hero's insane laner, great potential for like ganks. He has stuns, he's tanky, he does a lot of damage. His kit's just very good in general, and you usually want to have an Abrams on your team if you can help it. I'm putting Lady Geist in extremely strong. Like I explained a little bit earlier, she farms insanely fast, she like scales really well, and she makes use of those souls very well, like much better than a lot of other characters. I'm putting Wraith in good. The nerfs actually hit her a lot harder than I expected. So prior to the patch, I think Wraith was one of the best characters in the game. Now Wraith's damage output is significantly lower due to the changes on the 3, which forces you to make hard decisions with her build. I think this is healthy for the character. It wasn't really healthy to be like super insane for how long she was. But yeah, I would say she's still quite good, just not like extremely strong. You could make the argument for her being in strong as well. I'm putting Warden in strong. He did get some slight nerfs to his ult build, but his gun build was pretty much, you know, untouched. I think Gun Warden is extremely strong, especially with the current like meta where you can split push Slidewalkers, etc. If you go Veil Walker, you go gun build, you're very strong. Check out my build in game if you're interested. I think it's a pretty good build. I'm putting Haze in extremely strong. I think Haze is probably like the best left clicker in the game as far as just pure like, I guess auto attacks would be the MOBA term, but just like pure gun damage, pure ganking potential. She sets up plays. She's super active. She has insane tempo. The only thing about Haze is that she does fall off a little bit late game, and Metal Skin and Return Fire are still very, very good against her. But she like has so much momentum early that it's kind of hard to stop her. And so I think she's in extremely strong pretty solidly. I'm putting Dynamo pretty much at the top of strong. You could make the argument for Dynamo in extremely strong either as well. I think there's counterplay to Dynamo more than there is to some of these other characters in my opinion. There's a decent amount of things that can stun him out of his ult, and he needs some items to come online, but he's obviously insane, especially with the new item. Krill's in strong. Not much has changed. He's strong. He's got a grab. He's healthy. He's tankier, etc. Ivy. I would put Ivy at the top of strong as well, probably right below Dynamo maybe. Her movement speed during flight is now insane, and I think she's very, very high value character. And I'm going to go ahead and say the same for Kelvin, who's very, like, I would say Kelvin is almost extremely strong. Like, a lot of these characters are kind of on the verge of being as strong as these, but not quite. I'm going to go ahead and put Shiv as extremely strong, especially recently. I think Shiv is just like a very, very, very good character. Especially in unorganized play when people don't buy a ton of items to counter you, people don't spam slowing hexes at you. If you play against Shivs, please spam slowing hexes. It's very good. And Pocket depends on the player. I think if you're a very good Pocket player, he's probably extremely strong. If you're not as good of a Pocket player, so probably for the majority of you guys' games, like if you're, you know, below Ascendant or whatever, I would say Pocket is probably just strong. If you're a very, very good player, I would say he's extremely strong. So it really depends on your skill level. So I'll just leave him in strong just to be kind of on the safe side. And finally, and to explain Pocket, I guess it's just all of his kit is good. His kit has always been good. The meta is not bad for him. Like, you know, he just feels nice. And finally, McGinnis. I think McGinnis is probably somewhere in strong. I don't really know where to put her in strong, but she's definitely somewhere in there. And I don't know if there's a lot of characters that need buffs per se. The only, like, perhaps for 7 probably is the only one that I would put in need buffs. I think 7 is kind of weak, especially compared to the rest of the cast. I think most of the time I'd rather have an Infernus or some other characters. So as far as the one character that I would say needs buffs or maybe some adjustments, it would be 7. There's a lot of characters that I think could benefit from certain changes or buffs, but the only one that I can really think and feel is kind of weaker than the rest is 7 in my opinion. But even then, you could make the argument that he is fine, and I could see it. All right, so that's it for the video, guys. As just an outro, for those that are wondering where I am on the global leaderboards in North America, I think I'm like number 60 or something, 65. I kind of fluctuated between like 50 something and like 70. So that's where I am, if you were curious. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any video ideas, feel free to leave them in the comments. I always try to read as many comments as I can, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.